Hello everybody, my name is James Leggett, and today let's talk about the Sleepaway Camp films. Sleepaway Camp is a very unique horror film. It's not that scary, not that much gore, and if you go into it, it doesn't look too much like a horror film either, because it is set a lot during the day. However, it is very good. The characters that acted are perfect, the deaths are very creative, and it has one of the most different, if not controversial, twist endings of all time. Afterwards, we got Sleepaway Camp 2 and 3. While they aren't as good as the original and the more conventional slasher horror films, they're still loads of fun to watch. The franchise then went on a long break before we got Return to Sleepaway Camp, where the original director returned and ignored 2 and 3, which he had nothing to do with. But due to a combination of him being rusty after not making any films since the original Sleepaway Camp, a troubled production, and an honestly not very good script, it is easily the worst Sleepaway Camp film. At least, the worst completed Sleepaway Camp film. For you see, after Sleepaway Camp 3, the production company who made 2 and 3, the first one was an independent production, Double Helix Films, attempted to make Sleepaway Camp 4, The Survivor, but then they went bankrupt mid-shoot, and despite some attempts to resume shooting, apparently it never happened. In 2002, the raw footage of the film, which is just over a little over half an hour, was released on the Sleepaway Camp DVD box set. And in 2012, fans completed it. So how was it? Well, if you've seen the title of the video, you probably know how I feel about it, but let's not be too pessimistic. Now, I have explanations I'll show you. So, this is Sleepaway Camp 4, The Survivor. Oh, and spoilers for the other films, so if you haven't watched them, don't watch this video. So the movie starts off with the ending of Sleepaway Camp 3, which, fair enough, it makes sense to remind the audience where the last movie left off, especially if it's been a good while since they watched it. Oh, in this version, Tony and Marsha stay together this time. Good move. And then my goodwill dissipates because we get a very long text scroll in the form of patient record where it's revealed there's a woman called Allison who can't remember who she is, and the doctor has determined that she's a survivor of the Sleepaway Camp films. Angela Baker, who was the killer in those films, was never found, so I guess she escaped the ambulance at the end of 3. Anyway, the doctor tells Allison to go back to the campsite to go see if they'll help trigger any of her memories, and will they have an issue? Angela was the only person present in all 3 of the original films, meaning that the movie has already given away its big twist over who the survivor is. Oh, and this is just so lazy only having it be a text scroll. Why not film it, or at least have it voiceover from the doctor? At bare minimum, it's better than a text scroll. Then Alison screams, and I do actually rather like how this is framed, as we see her looking up as Angela, using 34, I think 2 or 3, one of those two, looks down at her. After the titles, we then have Alison casually sitting by the lake in a bikini thinking about Angela. Now, earlier when I mentioned they should have filmed the opening scene with the doctor, some of you may be wondering, but James, what about Alison's actress? They would have had to have a body double, and even then, would they have had to get someone who had a very similar voice, or it would be an intense continuity issue? Well,
I remember a day like today when Angela stalked these grounds looking for her revenge.
the fans who finished this film clearly weren't that concerned about that. Also, why does it sound so bad? Could they really not have gotten at least a decent microphone? And then, I'm not kidding, we get over an hour of scenes from the previous films bizarrely combined together. It randomly cuts from one film to the next with seemingly no cohesion, while occasionally cutting back to a shot of Allison relaxing. And the original quality of 1 to 3 footage is terrible. I guess they wanted to match how poor the quality of the footage from 4 was, but still, it makes the viewing experience even worse. And wait, why does the voiceover state that something bad happened over the tent is, even though the tent wasn't on a cliff edge in the last movie? And since it's Allison remembering all of this, why are we getting footage of scenes she wasn't present for? This doesn't make any sense. Anyways, after it ends, Allison decides she needs to get out of there and wonders where the park ranger is, because it was established in the text intro scroll that the doctor had arranged for her to meet up with the ranger, and then we fade to them making out. Wow, not even an attempt at explaining that. However, Allison decides she can't go through with it and runs off, and the ranger chases her, intercut with some footage of Angela walking through the woods from 2 or 3, just to pad this out a bit more. Despite the ranger briefly catching up to her, Allison's able to outrun him and runs into a hunter. The hunter almost shoots her and becomes down enough not to. And then after then we fade out, and we fade back into Alison walking through the woods on her own, having more flashbacks to the previous films. And I think it's here she realizes she's Angela, and then she encounters the park ranger again, tells him to stay out of the way or she'll kill him, and then leaves. And with a gun with absolutely no explanation as to where she got one. She then goes to the hunter, points a gun at him, and tells him that he's going to help her. Then we get a gunshot. There was some footage of some trees. Then we then cut to Alison standing next to a tree with a knife, wearing a different coloured bikini from earlier, and she already changed once before that. With more flashbacks to the previous films, then the ranger sneaks up on her. She turns around, and we fade to red before seeing the dead bodies of the ranger and the hunter. Apparently, there's supposed to be another text scroll saying that Alison is definitely Angela, who got amnesia due to her being knocked out by the ambulance driver after the events of 3 and she returned to the psychiatric clinic. But a copy of the movie I found doesn't have the second scroll. Besides, it doesn't make any sense for Angela to voluntarily return to captivity. It just feels out of character, in my opinion. And that was Sleepaway Camp 4. What a disjointed mess. It's clear there just wasn't enough footage shot in 1992 to be put together cohesively. It's just so disjointed. I read that there might have been test footage, which if true, would explain why it's so abysmal. No offense intended, but the acting just isn't very good. Carrie Chambers just isn't very good, in my opinion, which is probably why she only has a few acting credits. John Lodico, who plays the Ranger, only has one acting credit per decade. Richter Campos, who plays the Hunter, is the only Hunter in the original footage to have any kind of career and is the best actor in this, even though he's only on screen for about 2 minutes. So, what was the footage that was never filmed? Well, fortunately, there's a treatment online that explains this. First, there was supposed to be a scene where she meets up with the Ranger because the campgrounds were now federal property after being closed and abandoned. The Ranger would have pointed out that there was a resemblance between Alison and Angela, and then they would have told the campgrounds where Alison has the flashbacks to the previous films and gets exhausted. She then asks the Ranger, whose name is Jack, if they can have lunch. Jack takes Alison to the cabin, and this is where the filmed footage deviates from the treatment. In the treatment, instead of an abrupt makeout session, the Ranger instead would have tried to attack Alison, who then would have grabbed a knife from the kitchen and raised it as if she was going to stab him. She then realizes he could be Angela and flees. The treatment also says that the hunter, whose name is Eugene, was supposed to be played by John Gallagher, who's an actor that only has a couple of credits, so I guess this adds validation to the theory that it was just indeed test footage. Was Richter Campos just cheaper? Anyways, after Allison explains the situation to Eugene, he explains that Jack doesn't like him because he's a hunter, and he doesn't like Jack because he's trying to keep him off property that which Eugene's family has owned for generations, and as a result decides to take care of Jack once and for all. After Allison has a nightmarish sleep and more flashbacks from the previous film, she and Eugene go to Jack's cabin just to find him dead. Allison fears she may have killed Jack, and Eugene runs off in terror. This pretty much confirms to me that it is indeed test footage because the film footage makes absolutely no sense when compared to the treatment. Anyway, in the treatment, Eugene runs into two characters who were never filmed. Two characters called David, whom Richter Campos would have been playing, and Annie, who was seemingly never cast, and Eugene explains to them there's a killer on the loose. Meanwhile, Allison collapses and has more nightmarish flashbacks before waking up and finding a car with Eugene dead inside. Thinking as she killed him, she runs into David and Annie. David figures out she's Angela and tries to run off, is killed by a knife. It's then revealed that Allison was not Angela, but it's actually Annie. And that's where the treatment ends. So who was Allison? I don't know, the treatment doesn't say. Ugh. Either it would have been a retcon, or it just would have never been explained. Both, which are both pretty lazy if you ask me. And who's going to play Angela? Pamela Springsteen, sister of Bruce, who played Angela in 2 and 3, had retired from acting at this point, become a photographer, which, as of recalling, she still is. Would they have tried to convince her to come back with lots of money, which I doubt because they're in bankrupt? Would they have gone for Alyssa Rose back from the first film? Or would it have been a completely different actress? I guess we'll never know. In 2018, a final cut was announced for Blu-ray, but as of 2025, it's nowhere to be seen. And I asked, and they told me it wasn't coming out anytime soon. Maybe they've shot new footage to address the issue I had with it, but I'm not waiting how many years it takes for it to come out before doing this. I will do a review of it if it ever does come out. So, which then brings me on to how I would have finished it. Firstly, just make it a short film, having like a minute or two from the previous films is a nightmarish montage. Read up everyone so the new dialogue or that would be consistent. I'd open the film with a filled version of the doctor scene and explain that Allison packed multiple bikinis to explain why she wears different ones throughout the film for the sake of continuity, or maybe recolor them in post production, depends on which one makes more sense. I would then film a new scene, keeping the actors' faces hidden, of course, where Allison meets the Ranger. They would fancy each other almost immediately, leading out to the makeout scene. I would then film a few close-ups of Allison grabbing the gun from the Ranger's cabin, hiding it on her, explaining where she got it from. I would then add a new ending to the Hunter scene where a Hunter recognizes Allison and attempts to shoot her, but she pushes him away and runs away as he fires on at her, leading to the scene of her having flashbacks from the previous films, and I think this is where she realizes that she is Angela. Finally, when the Ranger sneaks up on Allison, I would add a close up of her stabbing him in the chest multiple times while hysterically screaming. I then add a scene of the doctor explaining that Allison and co have disappeared and wonder if they made a mistake of bringing back the memories of Angela Baker. So I have an idea of how to do it. Why did I actually do this myself? Well, one, it still wouldn't be a very good film, it'd be watchable at best. Two, it's not if I do make a sleepaway camp film, this is not going to be it. But I'm not telling you my actual idea. Maybe I'll make a fan film sometime. And three, somebody else wants to make it. You see, the person who owns the Sleepaway Camp's film's website has explained that he has the script and isn't going to share it because he wants to actually film it himself someday, and hopefully sooner rather than later. Hopefully it does happen. We Sleepaway Camps haven't had any new feature films since 2008 with the abysmal Return to Sleepaway Camp and the 2011 short film Judy, so yeah, we need more material. And it would be pretty interesting to see how the results turn out. They told me that they wouldn't cut anything from the script, so it should be pretty accurate. Anyways, thanks for watching.